Greetings, YouTubers. This is Sheepdog762, and with the events that have happened recently, we see guns on the news again. A lot of controversy has been going on for a long time. On one end, you have people that uh, don't think that guns belong in the hands of any civilians, and on the other end, you got people that believe that guns should be no more regulated than buying a cup of coffee. And in the middle is the rest of us. Um, so when I've looked around and trying to get some information, I found a couple of things that are general. There's a lot of sites and videos that are obviously politically motivated and they want to prove a point. And there's misinformation, either intentional or unintentional, and straight up lies. Also, a lot of the videos that are kind of serious and well prepared, talking about firearms, are making the assumption that everybody knows what the person is talking about, and some are right down condescending and not very friendly to somebody that hasn't been uh, around guns or familiar with them, right? So my intent here is to give you a little bit of information and talk about the different features and nomenclature, and hopefully, if legislation comes along and you'll be a little bit better informed if you cast your vote on what you're actually voting for. All right. So first thing I'm going to talk about, of course, is safety. I'm going to be showing you a few different guns. None of them are loaded. Everything's been verified. I don't have any ammo anywhere near me in case it wants to try and sneak into one of my weapons. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the general safety rules that most of us uh, observe or should observe. So the first one is that we treat every firearm as if it was loaded. Uh, Even after you take everything out, you treat it as if it was a loaded firearm. We never point at anything we don't intend to shoot, and we try to keep the muzzle or the weapon always pointed in a safe direction. I want to keep the fingers off the trigger until I sights are actually on the target. And if the weapon has a safety, I'm going to keep that safety on until I'm actually ready to fire. All right, so I'm kind of going to go in a chronological order. So my first, and I'm going to focus mainly on the handguns. So the first one I have is a single action revolver. This is a reproduction of something that came along right around the Civil War, being a conversion from some of the older cap and ball. Um, but some of the features that are coming to any other firearm is, first of all, we have a barrel. That's where the bullet comes out of. This end is the muzzle, and over here is the breech or the chamber. In this case, it's a revolver, so we have a cylinder. We have a hammer, and this one, you can see it, the fire pin is directly attached to the hammer. So when this drops, that firing pin is going to hit the primer on the back of the bullet, ignite the powder charge, pressure is going to build up, and launch the bullet out of the end of the barrel. While we're talking about that, one of the things that's also common you might hear about is rifling. So if you've ever seen a football toss, uh, if it's got a little bit of spin, it flies nice and straight. Otherwise, it'll tumble and won't go as far. Same thing with a bullet. So when it's traveling down the barrel, uh, pretty much anything other than shotguns is going to have a rifling. So I don't know if you can. I'm going to try and get it so you can see, and maybe you can see the grooves inside the barrel. If you've seen the beginning of a James Bond film, that's actually what you're looking through, is a barrel. And those grooves are designed to impart some spin on the bullet as it leaves the barrel. And different uh, types of bullets uh, have different spin rates, and you are going to hear that, the twist ratio. And uh, it varies between the velocity of the bullet and the size and all that other stuff. But you might hear twist rates, and that's what people are talking about. All right, getting back to our old revolver here. So this is considered a single action, and what that means is that each time I shoot it, I have to cock it, and then I pull the trigger, and that trigger just has one action, and that is to drop the hammer. So we talked about the barrel, muzzle, breech, cylinder. Of course, we have the trigger and the hammer and the frame. Next thing, I'm going to go along, and a little bit further down the line came the double action revolver. Again, this is empty. We have a cylinder, same as the single action revolver. This one swings out, and I can load my bullets a little bit easier than I did with the single action revolver. But the big thing that the big improvement that this made is it's a double action. So the trigger does two things. It's going to cock the pistol and fire it. I can also fire it single action on some, but all I have to do is pull the trigger, and it rotates the cylinder, cocks the hammer, and drops it on the projectile, on the bullet. Another thing that this has is an internal firing pin. The other pistol I showed you had the firing pin mounted directly on the hammer. This one is a floating firing pin sitting inside here, and it also has a transfer bar that prevents the hammer from actually hitting the firing pin unless the trigger is pulled. Excuse me. All right. A couple of other things that I haven't talked about are the sights, and I use those to point the weapon, obviously. So I have a front sight and a back sight, and when I'm shooting it, I'm going to line up the front sight right there, and I can shoot the tire off my bicycle. Alrighty. So these came around at the turn of the century, pretty much. Firearms evolved quite a bit, going from flintlocks to percussion to repeating arms in a very short time, around the 1800s. So around the Civil War, end of the Civil War, we had something that looked like this. By the 1800s, or late 1800s, I'm sorry, turn of the century, we already had the double action. And around that same time, partly due to the development of smokeless powder, we came out with our first semi-automatic weapons. So we talked about single action. I have to cock it by hand and squeeze the trigger. Double action, each time I pull the trigger, it cocks it, rotates the cylinder, and fires the next shot to the semi-automatic. So this is a recent version of the Colt 1911. It was the first, for the U.S. at least, semi-automatic handgun. And big change is I no longer have to cock it. Yeah, again, your weapon, no magazine. So in this one, when I squeeze the trigger, on this one it's a single action trigger. I pull the trigger, it drops the hammer. The recoil from the bullet firing is going to cycle the slide and chamber a new round. And then I'm ready to fire again. And I can keep doing that until the magazine is empty. Difference between semi-auto and full auto is this one, and I'm going to keep the trigger pulled back. I cycle it. I fired, it cycled, and the hammer is still cocked back. So I have to release the trigger and pull it again for the hammer to drop. In a full auto weapon, as long as I'm hold the trigger, it's just going to keep cycling and firing again until the magazine is empty. So, and this design is from the turn of the century, end of the 1800s going into the 1900s. And it's still in use, 100 years, over 100 years, and still a very popular handgun for competition and self-defense. Uh, the couple of things about this, it has a safety. So when I'm carrying this weapon, it was actually designed to be carried with the hammer cocked with the safety on. So when I pull the trigger, nothing happens until I take it off the safe, and then it fires. So, you know, it's one of those things. I've got a hammer being with a spring behind it and a sear that's keeping it from dropping. And I've never heard of any failures that where this thing discharged on its own, but it's always a possibility. These are mechanical things. So somebody said, okay, how can we carry this loaded without the hammer being cocked? So much like we have the double action revolver, we have a double action semi-auto pistol. And again, no magazine, no rounds in the chamber. Very similar to the other one I just showed you. I squeeze the trigger, hammer drops, but in case of this one, of course, if there was a round, it would have cycled, but it has a decocking feature. So I push that, and my hammer just dropped safely. If there was a round in the chamber, it would not fire. So now I can carry it with a round in the chamber. The hammer is down. It doesn't look as intimidating or maybe unsafe as the other one, but it is ready to go. When I pull the trigger, much like the revolver, it's going to cock it and drop the hammer. If there was a round, it would cycle, and now it switches to double action. And this is very similar design to what the military or our military is currently using with the Beretta. So double action semi-automatic, single action semi-automatic. Very similar designs, similar to the way they work. They have a hammer that hits a firing pin, ignites the primer, and sends the bullet on its way. More recently, we have a new design, and these are the striker fired pistols. Again, no magazine, no round in the chamber, and if you will notice, there is no hammer. And the way this thing works is the firing pin is attached directly to a spring. So when this cycles, there's a notch that catches on the firing pin and puts pressure on the spring, so that when I pull the trigger, it releases it, and the firing pin again strikes the primer and sends the bullet down its path. Same thing as my other handguns. I cocked it, haven't let go of the trigger, it doesn't shoot again. I have to release it, it resets, and I fire it again. One of the disadvantages of this is if for some reason I have a weak primer or something and the firearm doesn't go off, I don't have a second way of trying to shoot that same round. I can't cock it, so I have to rack the slide, put a new round in the chamber, and shoot it again. Not a big problem today because we've made a lot of advances in powder, primers, and everything. So the chances of a bullet not going off when the trigger's pulled are pretty slim. Back in the late 1800s, that was not the case, and that was one of the requirements from the military, is that I be able to cock it and try again if the gun misfired. And it was still a requirement in the 80s when we switched to a double action, that if I pull the trigger and nothing happened, I can give it a second try and see if it goes off again. So pretty basic stuff. Again, this is just focusing on handguns. Hopefully this helped you out again. Please put some comments if you have other questions that you would like me to answer. And I will see you again sometime soon, and we'll talk a little bit about rifles next. Alrighty, we'll see ya.